Regardless of where their personal relationship stands at this very moment, when you happen to be watching this video, Donald Trump and Elon Musk will together be known for the millions of deaths that they caused with their policy choices. This is their legacy. My name is Brittany Page, and this is the Page Perspective. And you don't have to take my word for it, because we're discussing a brand new research article that they surely do not want you to see. So make a plan right now to share this video to amplify the message. On Monday, I spent my morning in front of the Supreme Court here in Washington, D.C., where I met with protesters representing organizations like the Repairers of the Breach and the Poor People's Campaign. Protesters were there to raise awareness about the death and destruction to come from the Republican budget. As we know, the budget passed the Senate, and at the time of this recording of this video, it is with the House, so we do still have a chance to pressure our representatives to stop this train. But at the protest, I was particularly moved watching a procession with protesters holding coffins. Coffins representing the people who will die from cuts to Medicaid and food assistance. And I stood there with tears in my eyes as protesters moved silently through the crowd holding these coffins. And I thought, yes, this certainly applies to the budget. We also know it applies to the broader goals of the Trump administration and the damage caused by Elon Musk's Doge. And we have a new study that shows just how damaging Doge was and is, particularly with the slashing of USAID. And because I want this video to serve as a record that we can return to when people start praising Elon Musk as a savior of humanity, or when the Trump administration attempts to rewrite the history of what they've done, I want to go back in time and show you just how proud Elon Musk was of his work to dissolve USAID. Look at this tweet from February 3rd. Quote, "We spent the weekend feeding USAID into the wood chipper. Could gone to some great parties. Did that instead. And by doing that instead of going to great parties, millions of people will die. Elon, I'm begging you to go to more parties. Stay at the parties, never leave the parties for the sake of humanity." In a new study published in The Lancet, researchers analyzed data from 133 countries in order to do two things. One, evaluate how many lives have been saved by USAID. And then two, forecast how many lives will be lost because of policy choices by the Trump administration's decision to slash funding for USAID. For the first question as to how many lives have been saved, the researchers write, quote, "USAID-funded programs have helped prevent more than 91 million deaths globally, including 30 million deaths among children. And for the projected number of deaths, quote, projections suggest that ongoing deep funding cuts, combined with the potential dismantling of the agency, could result in more than 14 million additional deaths by 2030, including 4.5 million deaths among children younger than 5 years. Now, let's just pause here for a moment. I want you to focus on the could result here, because these are indeed just projections. But imagine being in a position of power and learning that a choice that you made could potentially result in more than 14 million additional deaths, including 4.5 million deaths among children younger than 5. What would you do? As long as your name isn't Donald Trump or Elon Musk, you'd probably reverse whatever decision it is that you made to cause that to happen, yes? You would take action to stop these deaths. You would restore funding, yes? They could restore funding. They could reverse course. They could stop this right now, and they should. But will they? The cult-like mentality that exists for some on the right is causing them to hear these numbers and say, well, that's not our problem. And I'm going to get to that in a moment. But first, I want to read from this research, from these researchers on the implications of their findings. Quote, USAID funding has had a crucial role in improving global health, particularly by reducing mortality from poverty-related diseases and saving the lives of millions of adults and children. Current and proposed U.S. aid cuts, along with the probable ripple effects on other international donors, threaten to abruptly halt and reverse one of the most important periods of progress in human development. For many LMICs, that is low-income and middle-income countries, the resulting shock would be similar in scale to a global pandemic or a major armed conflict. Unlike those events, however, this crisis would stem from a conscious and avoidable policy choice, one whose burden would fall disproportionately on children and younger populations, and whose consequences could reverberate for decades. These have been investments in global health and education and poverty reduction. USAID has helped other countries create the infrastructure for local healthcare systems that allow them to keep people alive, to make substantial progress in fighting disease. And without USAID funding, that progress is at risk. Many international aid organizations have reduced their own commitments to funding because of the cuts to USAID, which could then cause even more death and destruction. And according to a professor at UCLA and co-author of this study, quote, U.S. citizens contribute about 17 cents per day to USAID, around $64 per year. I think most people would support continued USAID funding if they knew just how effective such a small contribution can be to saving millions of lives. And it's kind of sad that we have to cite numbers on the impact to one's bottom line being minimal, because apparently preventing nearly 5 million deaths of children under 5 isn't enough of a selling point for a lot of people. A lot of people who also, by the way, surely find themselves in church on a Sunday morning with their hands to the sky, praising their awesome God. Now, this scientific analysis published in The Lancet is separate and apart from reporting that we've seen in recent months since the effort to ruin USAID, reporting that has illustrated the immediate direct consequences of these funding cuts. And one example of this reporting has been from Nicholas Kristoff with the New York Times. And because he spends so much time writing about international aid, he gets a lot of pushback from his readers. And I really appreciate what he has to say in response to that pushback. And in response to a question of why is it our job to keep kids alive in poor countries? And because you may be faced with those same questions, and I want you to be armed with a response, I want to read what he writes here. Quote, USAID was established to advance our national interests as well as our values, and its demolition means that the United States loses soft power and China gains. Already, China has moved to replace the United States as the most visible supporter of Cambodia, and we'll see the same elsewhere, particularly in Africa and the South Pacific. Anti-terrorism programs in Syria and West Africa are faltering and may lead to new attacks on Americans. Surveillance for early detection of avian flu and Ebola is weakened, and an epidemic of either disease could reach America and cost billions of dollars. Trump's defunding of the polio eradication effort may lead, by one USAID official's estimate, to 200,000 cases of paralytic polio each year. The same official warned that the aid stoppage could lead to nearly a 1/3 increase in tuberculosis cases. Some of those will reach the United States and lead to enormous expense. A single case of extensively drug-resistant TB can cost around $500,000 to manage. And in another article, he cited these numbers, quote, a starving child on the brink of death can be brought back with a specialty peanut paste, Plumpy Nut, costing just $1 a day. And the anemia that often causes women to hemorrhage and die in childbirth can be prevented with prenatal minerals and vitamins, costing $2.13 for an entire pregnancy. And aside from all that, it's simply the right thing to do. We are told that we cannot afford health care for our most vulnerable in this country and food assistance in this country, but we can afford trillions of dollars in tax cuts for the wealthy. I refuse to accept that. And there are many people who refuse to accept this. I was with them on Monday in the streets of DC as they carried coffins. I said this early on. let this be a record. Let this be a record that Elon was once proud of his work slashing USAID. That Donald Trump propped up Elon Musk and promoted Doge and their work in dismantling USAID. Let the record reflect that research was conducted on the life-saving impact of USAID's work and that projections were made showing that millions of deaths would come from slashing USAID. And if Donald Trump refuses to reverse course on this issue, if Secretary of State Marco Rubio continues to be Donald Trump's little yes man, and 1 year from now, we start to see on-the-ground reporting showing us the immense death and destruction caused by these policy choices, let the record reflect that they had the opportunity to choose another path and refuse to do so. But also let this be a reminder of the power we have. When I was in the streets talking to protesters, I was filled with hope that people were in the streets, in community with one another, raising awareness about what we're facing and holding space for others. The budget narrowly passed the Senate and required a tie-breaking vote from J.D. Vance. These House Republicans, they need to fear their constituents more than they fear Donald Trump. Right now, they think it's Donald Trump that has the most power over whether they will continue to remain in power as elected officials. But they need to be reminded that they work for you. You give them the power. So pick up your phone, call your Republican congressman, tell them to demand they vote no on the budget, no cuts to Medicaid, no cuts to SNAP, and restore funding for USAID. What do you think? Call and leave me a fewer than 3-minute voicemail at 202-656-1509 or send an email to info@thepageperspective.com. You can support my work by becoming a channel member by clicking the join button below for as little as $1.99 a month, or by going to patreon.com/idoubt-a-podcast. Comment below and tell me what you want to hear me talk about. What do you want to see me cover? What do you want to see from me? Share the channel with a friend. Don't forget to subscribe, all the things. But most importantly, keep fighting, take care, and I will see you next time.